So, I think it's, in one sense, it is that anarchistic democratization. It's a natural outgrowth of people being deprived of the structure of a church, so that they are finding in their day-to-day lives some of these same spiritual experiences, and realizing that we serve each other in many ways that would be covered by a dedicated priest or minister or whatnot. At the same time, there's something to be said for the, shall we say, technician of the sacred, someone who feels they have a vocation. And you yourself, Bob, at one time were considering the priesthood in the Anglican Church, as I recall, and even studied toward that end. So, I think there are people that have a vocation to spend 24/7 working as a priest. And I'm not saying that other people can't fulfill those functions, but when you expand that term, I think we might be in danger of losing some nuance, if you know what I mean. Just my 2 cents.
Terms are interesting because I know a lot of people who won't say the word God because they feel that people have used the word God to mean something so different from what it actually is, that it's corrupted the word God. And I find that fascinating because in all the different variations, the vacuum, the universe, the source, all these other things, there just isn't the same thing, that same idea of one supreme, unified, spiritual entity that drives humanity towards goodness. And so it's really difficult when trying to communicate about these things. Because even if you're talking about dogs, right? One person's dog means a big black Rottweiler guard dog that chases away the bad guys. Another person's dog is something that you put in your handbag and take to the mall with you. So even using an absolutely simple word can lead to huge misunderstandings between what people mean. And so it's an interesting time that we live in, where we're trying to redefine what it means to be a person with a moral backbone.
See, I mean, with me, that seems to be the problem, though. Because like I've listened to you, and I've listened to Tan, and I've listened to Otto, and everybody, and you guys have said some amazing stuff. Okay, and I've done the research on stuff going all the way back to the primordial times, when people would worship the sun instead of the sun god, you know what I mean? And there's things that people today are trying to reinvent, in my opinion, you know what I mean? Like a lot of these pagan beliefs that are actually a part of history is being used for things like freaking New Age religions and New Age mysticisms and stuff like that, and they're not being honest, or not really honest, but like forthright about where they're actually getting their information. You know what I mean? And how that blends in with today's kind of thinking.
Yeah.
But this sort of lacking nuance and redefining words is a wider issue. I mean, I have criticised people many times, and Roger knows, about the terms Nazism and fascism. That has been those words have been corrupted or misused.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and yeah, I'm famous for, like, are you talking about the Italian political philosophy of the early 20th century, which has a very different ideas, goals, and underpinning ideology than, say, National Socialism or Falangism, or even what's his name there that took over Peronism in Argentina. So these are all different, very nuanced. And one of the funny things about them is when you actually study them, like read their writings and stuff, you start to realize that, it's a very interesting bit of history, but they're really concerned with a completely different set of social and political problems than we have today. I really think most of these philosophies are pretty much irrelevant to most of what we're coping with, and yet people jump all over them. It's like the neo-pagans that Roger was talking about, where people are seeking for spirituality. They've been told again and again, you don't dare be a Christian because that's cringe and evil and da-da-da-da-da and all the bad things in the world. Christians and the witch hunts and stuff. They used to have witch hunts in 300 BC. Okay, there was a plague going on in Rome, and they went through and they found all these people, your poisoners, your sorcerers. They had all kinds of executions. I forget how many people. They were driving people. That this is the same behavior kind of deal. So the neo-pagans, to my mind, if you want a pagan religion, and by which I define neither Christian, Muslim, nor Jewish, well, go to somewhere where there are actually practicing pagans. Go to India. Buddhism is arguably a pagan religion since it's not one of the big three. Study living, how people are actually doing it, because these guys basically, a lot of times, I think, first of all, they're coming out of a Christian culture. The West is Christian, and I love G.K. Chesterton that said, if you really want any touch with the old pagan traditions, you have to go to the church. Because everything else we have in our society is basically the result of us being a Christian society. The newspaper, the kinds of government we have, the idea that, a lot of these ideas about the dignity of human life and stuff come out of this, I think. But if you really want to go back to the old traditions, you go to midnight mass, and that's like, it's, if you could look at that with pagan eyes, it's a wonderful sun worship thing, the physical sun in the sky, the God in the sky. The Christian, of course, is spiritualizing this. It's a different sun. But that was always one of the things that brought the pagan community over into Christianity, the similarity in symbols with a shift in the spiritual meaning. But with the guys today, I respect anyone that's seeking, and that kind of reminds me of what we were talking about a little while ago about when Bob was saying about how people don't use the term God because of the misunderstandings that can accrue. And I was thinking, if you go on the spiritual path, no matter what it is, you're trying to get closer to God. You're trying to get closer to that spiritual truth, which is basically inexpressible. So all something like the church does is provide you with a path within the paradigm of your society in terms you can understand, because no word is going to be able to properly describe it. All you can do is give people a mechanism to help them reach this themselves through whatever means, kind of deal. But I do worry about some of the. I was going to say I do worry about some of the neo-pagans running around. But go on, Bob.
There's a really interesting story somewhere in the New Testament, possibly in the Acts of the Apostles, that talks about after Jesus died, there was this huge debate amongst the Jewish leadership about what they should do about this. They'd managed to get rid of this guy that was spreading misinformation and that was dissing the system and bringing all these conspiracy theories to light. And they'd managed to get him out of the picture by murdering him, and that was cool. But they didn't know how to stop these stupid people who kept on believing his misinformation. And there's a really interesting little passage there where the one guy says, if what he says isn't the truth, it'll die out. But if what he says is actually true, it will remain over time, and there's nothing we can do about it. And I think that it's very interesting when you think about the development of religion in the British Isles, that Anglicanism was a new religion that was created the British people took the Christianity that came to them and they decided to integrate it with their pre-existing understanding of divinity. And they updated their language and they updated their concepts and they jumped forward, quite a few years from a Stone Age representation of the understanding of the world to a much more like Iron Age, perhaps, understanding.
Okay, you're talking about the pagan to Christian jump, right?
Yes. What I'm saying is
that would have been a Catholic church then. You said Anglican church. I'm like, what? Anglican church back then? 300 AD? You meant the Catholic Church,
Catholicism, when what became Catholicism reached the British Isles, the British people were very different from the rest of Europe. The rest of Europe sort of said, oh, okay, if you say so, we'll do that. But when the British people looked at it, they said, we've already got a really good way, but this way fits in with our way, so we'll adopt this thing. I mean, for instance, Christmas and Christmas trees and, Easter. Easter already occurred on a ceremony that was celebrated in the British Isles. So what I'm trying to get at is that there's an underlying understanding in human beings about what the spiritual world is. And whatever the religion is called, it doesn't change what the people do in order to try and have a relationship with that spiritual world. And pagans, or some people nowadays, tend to not want a relationship with the spiritual world. They just want a way of doing things right, which is a completely different rationale to wanting to actually relate to the spiritual.
That's actually, I think, a good insight into, and Chesterton said something similar about the older pagan religions were more about the older idea of you just did what was right, and what was right was what the God wanted, and then you just did that. You didn't have that personal moral framework to which you relate, that check on things that Tan was talking about earlier, that moral conscience, and moral consciousness too, I guess, sort of thing. It's more than just doing it right. You have to be right as well.
I'm not sure if it's a question of rightness as much as staying alive. Do the right thing so that you don't die of a disease. You don't cause a vendetta in your family, or
keeping social stability. You're saying, basically.
Yeah. I'm saying that the point of these, as I see it, the point of these systems that tell you how to be right are to promote a communal lifestyle. Yeah. Whereas the point of having a relationship with something bigger than yourself is much more of an individual pursuit.
We actually had a good conversation on this, Otto, because if you remember, I think it was on your show where I had mentioned this goes back to the Babylonians, where there was a ritual that took place within the Babylonian communities that was religious, where the person who was I guess you'd call it the Babylonian king, he would have to be slapped in front of freaking everybody so that he would show it.